Welcome to But Her Lyrics, the show where we delve into the meaning and politics behind the songs of artists you love or are about to discover right now. I'm Shawna Potter, singer and lyricist for War on Women, and your host. I have no songs about the environment. Isn't that strange? Because it's kind of a big deal, and it feels wrong not to have one, especially after interviewing this episode's guest, Rozzi. We recently discussed her song Orange Skies, an autobiographical song that happens to be about the disaster that is man-made climate change. I think she's done a beautiful job of personalizing this fucking crazy threat. And I'm kind of jealous. I've just never found my angle, you know? I guess it sort of felt like too big of an issue to distill into a 3-minute punk song. But luckily, I'll also be chatting with Julia Nerbonne this episode, an organizer focused on the intersections of climate change and racial justice. And she breaks it all down into smaller, more manageable pieces, thank goodness, and assures us that it's okay to start small. As always, listen through the end of the episode to hear the song in question. Patreon! This episode sponsors our First Defense Krav Maga in Virginia, love you guys, and Pupcakes and Pastries. Their links are in the description of the show, and big shout out to my badass recruit, Melissa P. Sign up as a recruit on my Patreon, Rosie, with the scratching. There you go. Sign up as a recruit on my Patreon if you want an official sponsor shout out on the show. You'll also get a copy of my book for free and get to make random weird requests. So head to patreon.com/Shawna Potter to see everything else you get at any of the 6 available support tiers. All right, I'm not going to waste any more time getting to it because we don't have any more time to waste. That's an environmentalism joke. Okay, here's my interview with Rozzi. Interview time! Rozzi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
For this little podcast. I appreciate it. Introduce yourself to everybody.
I'm Rozzi. I'm an artist, a singer, and a songwriter, and the deluxe version of my album just came out today.
Yay! Now people will hear this after it's come out, but that means no excuse. Grab it now.
Days, months, whatever. It's been out.
So grab it now. So the song we're talking about, Orange Skies.
Yes.
This song is about wildfires in California getting worse as a result of climate change, something you've personally been affected by because you live there.
Yeah.
What were the challenges to writing such a personal song on a topic this big?
Totally. I think that songs about such big concepts are the hardest songs to write. I find like the smaller the idea, the easier it is. And so, it can be very daunting, and it was very daunting. I remember the only reason I wrote it was because the skies, when I walked over to my friend Eric Leva's house, who I was writing with, the skies were literally orange. And it felt insane to write about anything else. Like it just felt like really crazy. So that's the only reason I decided to tackle that, because exactly your point. It's just, it can be very hard to make something that big feel that small. So what I tried to do is really find the personal in the big, because big as an issue as climate change and wildfires is, it's actually just like a very personal, the real problem here is how it's going to affect all of us on a very personal level. And so I really just did what I always do with songs, which is think of tiny little moments that mean a lot to me. And so I tried to capture like all these little tiny vignettes, little intimate moments from my life in the Bay Area, just to paint the picture of like a life and which is what we stand to lose, basically. I was just trying to capture like my own little life growing up in San Francisco, some hyper Californian references maybe, but,
Yeah.
Trying to really like capture that individualness of it and really try to make it clear that like that's what we stand to lose without addressing climate change.
I've seen images of those wildfires. Does it compare at all to seeing it in real life, that sky?
I mean, yeah, there's some photos that are pretty terrifying that I think give a similar feeling. But the crazy thing about being there in person is like you can smell it and taste it. And it's like when I walked to my friend's house after I got there, I was like, I probably shouldn't have been outside. Like the air is, it's just surreal. It's like, there's an energy in the air that like something is like incredibly wrong, you know, like it feels very silent. Like I might be inventing this, but it feels like the birds disappear. Like it just feels really like eerie, and haunting because, you know, fortunately, knock on wood, where I actually live in Los Angeles wasn't in flames, but it was just this clear signal that something very close by was.
I mean, speaking of haunting, this song, I think, captures that feeling really well. The song is really stripped down. It's just piano and voice. And I don't think that's super unusual for you, right? But
Yeah.
there is a sadness and this haunting feeling that is different from your other songs.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was the other thing, like with such a big concept, how do we convey the heaviness of it, like melodically and with the chords and everything and the production, like you're saying. So Eric Leva, who produced it, we wrote it together, and the version that's out is really just the demo we did from that day.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you ever record a bigger version?
No, it wasn't even mixed. It's just because all of a sudden it was very timely to put it out. You know, all of a sudden it was like, this is happening again. And then it was happening in San Francisco, where I'm from. Is the year we put it out was a year later. It's like I wrote it during the LA wildfires, and then we put it out during the San Francisco ones, the Bay Area ones. And we didn't even really have time to rethink it. We just we just put it out to raise some money. And we definitely wanted, like, I think the da, 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 like those melodies are like spooky to me. That was on purpose for sure, but not in like a manipulative way, just in a very honest way. Like it's really scary. Like I feel really afraid, just personally afraid of what these fires could do to people I love, to places I love, to me, to our health, to my future, to the likelihood of being able to stay in California ever, to having kids in general. Like the whole thing just, you know, it encapsulates a lot of my fear. So we tried to capture that in the writing and in the production for sure.
I would say that you did.
Thank you.
You absolutely did. Like, can you speak to any of the specific melody decisions that you were making? Like, did you think like, oh, this key is the creepiest key, or, anything like that?
No, I wish I had a cool answer for you. I'm such an intuitive writer. It's really all about like a feeling. Like that's such a cliche, I guess, but it really is. It's like, I'm a little bit methodical with lyrics. Like I try and be really creative, like in a like a songwritery way with my lyrics. But when it comes to chords and melodies, first of all, I'm just not as probably as much of a music nerd as I'd need to be to do that successfully. But also it's just not it's not part of my process. It's more like, does this feel like I feel?
Well, no judgment, because I'm the exact same way. So no worries. Yeah. It helps to have someone in the room that actually knows the names of the notes, because that ain't me.
Right. I do. I mean, I know the names, but I don't think of them. The only song that I've ever chosen the key based on an emotion was a song I have called Bad Together. Same writer, Eric Leva, and I wrote that together. And I remember that day, he Googled, what is the saddest key? And I think it's in B flat or it's in D flat. I forget. But apparently one of those is the saddest key. But that's the only time I've ever done that.
But that's like a fun writing prompt.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Okay, let's write a song that's like, oh, I love that. I love that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the line early in the song, laughing in the backseat of our own damn lives. Whatever's coming won't be soon. And I love the way you sing it. I love the way it's spaced. And it puts this very relatable feeling of being young and just being pulled along by life, like totally unbothered, unfazed, not thinking about the future at all. Like, do I have that right? Is that what you were trying to convey?
Yes. Basically all those lyrics, those like early verse lyrics, what I see in my head is almost like I'm pressing fast forward and I'm watching this video of my life. And so they're all real little moments.
Mm.
And early ones there's a lot, it's Bay Area and LA, like just from when I grew up in San Francisco and when I moved to Los Angeles, and laughing in the backseat of our own damn lives. Exactly. Like you said, it's like, I remember being a teenager, maybe kind of nervous in the backseat of someone's car, like maybe we're smoking weed, maybe I'm afraid to, like just, what may or may not come across is like coming from the Bay Area, a very liberal place. Like we knew about climate change. I'd been taught about it for as long as I can remember in science class. Like,
right.
That's whatever's coming won't be soon. We all believed in it. We all were like, climate change is coming and it's real. Like none of us were blind or unaware or in denial, but there still was this kind of, and I wanted to capture that too. Like, there is an element of shame and guilt in that, even if we all were that way. Like there isn't, even if I was 15 and it wasn't my job and there were plenty of, leaders who have more blood on their hands, it is still, it's dark, but I still feel like whatever's coming won't be soon. We're just laughing in the back seat. Like we know where we're going, but we were just kids kind of letting it happen. And I think that eeriness in my worst hours comes to get me because I think about where we're headed as a planet, and it's really terrifying. And it's even worse that we knew, So that's what I was trying to capture. It's a lot in one line, but
you do it. Was there something specific that like radicalized you a little bit or made you more aware, or was it just?
No, I think that's my point. It's like I can't remember when I learned about climate change because I always knew. Coming from San Francisco, growing up in like the 2000s, like we knew about it. It's the reason orange skies, it's like, that's when it starts to be in my backyard. It's happening. Like, oh, here we are, as expected. Here it comes, and so it's like, I'm not sure I was ever radicalized. It was more just like, okay, now my life is affected. It's not just this theoretical thing. It's like I breathe this air. That's when I step out of my own house.
Proceeds from this song are being donated. Can you tell us about that, where they're going?
Yes. You know what? It's been so long. I know we did Red Cross and Sonoma Family Meals, I believe what the second one's called, but I just want to make sure I got that right because it's been a couple years since I've talked about this song. Yeah, we just wanted to try to do something, I just was like, that's the whole point of putting the song out. And so we did, I wanted to do one very local and one very major organization just to, because sometimes I don't really know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And so I just wanted to spread it out a little bit and give it like Sonoma, I'm from, like I said, San Francisco, the Bay Area was really affected. I wanted the people from my community to help them as much as possible. And then Red Cross is just so massive. I just thought it's like the two bookends of the spectrum.
Switching gears a little bit, your voice is quite resonant and on the deeper side. And if I'm being honest, it's not the voice I expected to come out of you visually. Do you get that a lot?
Constantly. Yes. I think it's one of the most, no, it's okay. I find it flattering. I think a lot of my favorite singers, I think you could say the same thing, or if not, they look nothing like me. So I appreciate that sentiment. But I do hear it all the time. And it can be like almost a party trick sometimes if people don't know me.
I love that.
I'm somewhere, I'm like, it can be a fun party trick. Yeah.
That's fun. What's my party trick? Maybe like a rap. All right, Rozzi, well, tell people how to get in touch with you and let us know what you're up to in the year 2023.
So you can get in touch with me on all my social media. I will respond to your DMs on Instagram if you DM me at This Is Rozzi. And my plans in 2023, well, I just put out my deluxe album. It's called Berry. And it's the culmination.
What kind of berry?
Berry, like Berry, like the fruit. Yeah.
With depending on the accent, you never know.
Totally. Yeah. Not the person. Yeah. The fruit. And it's a culmination of like, honestly, I've been working on and releasing this music for years. Like it's come out in pieces and it's finally out in its entirety. In the order I've always wanted it. It's out on vinyl. It's the first vinyl I've ever done. And that just came out in November. Thank you. And I have to say, I actually just had a meeting with my management team and we're discussing, I have a very specific idea that I'm obsessed with for my next record. So I'm about to go back home to LA to write it every day. And so hopefully, I mean, I will be playing shows. I'm playing a show in San Francisco in February, I know for sure. And then hopefully some more shows throughout the year. But I think more music, it might be coming sooner than even I thought.
Exciting.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All
Yeah.
right, cool. Thank you so much for joining me, Rozzi, for this interview.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure to talk about the song with you. It's beautiful.
Thank
People should go
you.
listen to it.
Thank
And then, of
you.
course, check out the show notes to see what else we can learn or where we can donate.
I mean, one thing I will say is just always vote with climate in mind. I feel like that's I'm not going to have numbers right now, but I know that your state and your federal or your I'm assuming, I don't know about other countries, but your state and your federal government spends more money than any nonprofit in the world. So they have more of an effect, in, as far as I understand, than anybody. So I would love to include some nonprofits that we can also support, of course. But every time you vote, I would keep the climate in the forefront. I certainly do.
Thank you so much, Rozzi.
Thank you so much for having me.
When I was a kid, way young, I lived in LA for a few years. And hearing Rozzi talk about the West Coast really brought back some memories, like getting a smog forecast every day along with the weather, or rushing to the nearest doorframe when an earthquake hit. And though I think I'm a little bit older than Rozzi, but when I was in school, I also remember learning about recycling or cutting up those 6-pack rings, right? And buying less plastic or taking shorter showers. As if this shit is down to the individual. As if the power to reverse climate change was on each of us kids. But I still recycle. I still cut up the rings from a 6-pack. I don't think I'll stop because, well, it kind of helps me feel like I have a little bit of control in a seemingly out of control situation. Thankfully, my next guest assures me that it's not quite out of control yet. We do have the power to reverse course, and it can start small. Interview time! Julia, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Please introduce yourself to everyone and tell them why the hell I invited you on the podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me. So my name is Julia Nerbonne. I am a climate organizer in Minnesota. And for the past 10 years, I've been running social movement organizations, trying to get people out and about and taking action on climate change and racial justice and to talk about climate justice. So I've been involved in movements across the country to try to reduce fossil fuels and get both the government and also local communities to take action.
That's amazing. I want to start by asking, why should someone in Middle America or Florida or the Northeast even care about some fires over in California? What's the big deal?
I was thinking about this question a little earlier, and of course, the real question is, why do we care about anything that hurts somebody that's not us, right?
Yeah.
It's a pretty important question. I think that Americans need to be asking themselves today, because it's certainly a pretty self-centered culture as a general rule. But, I think about, 2018, there were 103 people who were killed in California because of forest fires. And there were, I think, 25,000 structures that were impacted, maybe 18,000 homes that burned down.
Wow.
And I don't know about you, but I saw some of those images coming across the news of people trying to outrun a fire with their vehicle and really literally running for their lives from this hellscape that was emerging there. And, when we see those images as humans, right, we're sort of psychologically built to respond with empathy or with horror or, people give money, people think to themselves, wow, that's incredibly terrible. What can I do to help that, person in that truck outrunning the fire? I think it's a little more difficult for people to see that fire in California as a symptom of something that's much, much larger, global climate change. And, starting to think about the fact that actually maybe we do need to care about this, not just for that person in that truck or the person who's lost their mother, but also because, in fact, it's a early warning sign of the kinds of disasters that are coming fast and furious across the world. And we need to be thinking about that as the at least, in Minnesota, if I'm asleep in the middle of the night and my smoke alarm goes off, I wake up and I take action and adrenaline runs through my body. Can we think about those fires in California like a smoke detector or a warning sign that will call us to action so that we can make sure that the world that our children live in is something that's, livable, beautiful.
Or still exists.
Yeah, totally.
Rozzi's song is obviously about a personal experience, something that they witnessed. But to zoom out, how bad are things really?
They're super bad. Not going to mince words. I started this 10 years ago, and I've been thinking about climate change for a lot longer than that, but professionally, I've been talking with people and helping them sort of step into a powerful place of action for over a decade. And since then, things have gotten dramatically worse, even in my short life. Right now in 2022 or in 2021, the United Nations has a report. It's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they put a report out. They've done 6 reports now. And I'm going to actually open this document and read to you what the Secretary General of the United Nations said.
Okay.
So he said, this report that they did in 2021, where they're summarizing all of the information from scientists across the world on the sort of state of global warming. So your question, how bad is it? And he says, this report is a code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening and the evidence is irrefutable. Greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuel burning and deforestation are choking our planet and putting billions of people at immediate risk. And, that was a sort of a more striking warning than we've had for a long time. I actually get very distressed by people who talk about, well, on average, the temperature will raise 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees. And people just think, oh, I don't mind, 1.5 degrees is 2.3 degrees Fahrenheit. What's the difference between 90 and 93, right? And I like people to think about, instead of thinking about an average temperature, like, how would it impact you on a particular day? Think about
your air conditioning that day. Yeah, it's not about that, right?
No, not about the air conditioning, but like how, if your child had a fever of, 99.5 versus 104, that would be the difference between life and death. And those are the kinds of differences in temperatures that we're talking about as we think about what the UN is predicting. So if they're predicting that if we do everything that humans are able and prepared to do, that the temperature is still going to be up 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is 2.3 degrees Fahrenheit by the middle of the century. And they say if we don't do anything at all, we're going to see 3 degrees Celsius or 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's what they're talking about. And so if we think about that like a child who is sick, it's very dramatic. What that means, though, is that we are going to have temperatures for example, in India or in Pakistan that are in the 120 degree range Fahrenheit. And those are temperatures that humans literally can't live under. But we're also seeing floods and droughts and forest fires like the one that you described, that are impacting people, right now. So, 33 million people were displaced in Pakistan this summer because of flooding. 33 million people.
Wow.
I know. It's just insane. So it's really bad.
What is the best way for an individual to affect change? Because you talking about this, it obviously feels very overwhelming. And I bet it's easy for a lot of people to say, well, what the fuck am I supposed to do? And it's easier to do nothing.
than to actually grapple with the reality of this, our world trying to get rid of us because we are parasites.
Yeah.
What do we do? What can we do?
That's right. I like to think of ourselves as, so, the cool thing about humans and human brains, right, is we actually are great at solving problems. We're very smart and we're very compassionate as people. And I think that first thing to remember is there's been a concerted campaign to keep the public from knowing about climate change,
Yes.
understanding its risk, et cetera. Right. So same exact people who designed the campaign to try to convince people that not everybody agreed that smoking was bad, right, have also designed the campaigns to convince us that, well, climate change, maybe, but it's just not a big deal sort of thing. So they've been doing this for decades. We know why climate change is happening. It's greenhouse gases that are coming from fossil fuels. Super clear. Everybody agrees. And agriculture, cows fart out methane. I always like to think about all the cow farts. We got to get rid of the cow farts.
Go vegan, people.
That's right. And we got forests that are, as they burn, of course, it's hard to, those trees are themselves carbon sinks, right? So when we burn the forests, so anyway, a couple of things. Climate change is real. It's real. It's really serious. It's caused by us. We know what it's coming from. It's happening right now. It's not something that's out 50 years in the future. But the thing you need to know is that there's huge things that we can do in the next decade that will make a difference. And so right now we have seen the biggest climate bill in American history, which just passed this past summer in August. It's called the Inflation Reduction Act, which is kind of a jargony thing. But basically, $370 billion are being deployed in the U.S. to help communities and states and businesses combat climate change. So right now is the time, maybe give it 4 or 5 months, start researching how you can become solarized, how you can get a heat pump, how you can do energy efficiency in your home, because that stuff is going to be basically free for people who have a little bit of capital to invest in it. Like you're going to invest a couple $1,000s and then your heat bill it'll like pay itself off in a couple of years.
So in the States, in the middle of the year 2023, start looking into this.
Start looking into this in the United States right away. Yep. Or in the middle of 20. Yeah. Because things right now are the details are being worked out. All the agencies are trying to figure out how to give the money out and stuff like that. But basically there's going to be tax breaks for good stuff, electric cars and solar panels and heat pumps and things that will reduce your carbon footprint. So that's really cool. I also think that, we forget that actually just talking about climate change is a huge part of a movement for changing the status quo. So there's this really cool study. You can look it up. It's called Global Warming 6 Americas. There's a guy at Yale, Anthony Lazarowitz, who puts this out. And he says that they've done research for years on like what is the perceptions of climate change or global warming amongst Americans. And he said 72% believe that global warming is happening. 66% report to be really worried about global warming, but only 35% of Americans discuss global warming at least occasionally. And only 33% report to hearing about it in the media at least once a week. So we've got this huge gap between what people are feeling and what they know and what they talk about or what they hear about in the news. And in the middle of that gap is this total void of Netflix and fun times, right? And basically denial. Although it's not denying that climate change exists. It's like people are like just living their lives and they're thinking about it only, a very little amount. So let's talk about it. We got to talk about it. We can't respond to a smoke alarm unless there's a smoke alarm. So we need to all together be thinking about this. And then I think that we need to really think about this like you would think about trauma, right? If you get a cancer diagnosis, right, you may not be feeling sick that very day. But if you know that you have stage 4 cancer, you're going to be filled with fear. You're going to want to take action, right? we don't want people to be traumatized about climate change, but we do want people to take action. And so if we don't think of it like something that is traumatizing people, we know that the first thing people do when they're traumatized is try to put it out of their mind. Right? And we know that the things that help us respond to I know you've done a lot of work in, helping survivors. I think that, one of the first things that you have to do if you've experienced trauma is to figure out how you can tell your story and put things on your own terms and sort of reclaim your life. And I think that that's what people need to do if they have heard that the world is ending, right? They're feeling this tension, and they need to be able to get out and do things about it. And I just love the work of this woman, Mary Pfeiffer, who wrote a book called The Green Boat. And she talks about how she and her buddies in Lincoln, Nebraska got together and, they baked pies and they took them over to the Nebraska legislature and gave them to the lawmakers who were considering bills about global warming. Right.
Wow.
And so they got together, be joyful together. They got to acknowledge that they were in this real crisis, but then they got to be, hanging out, doing something fun, taking action, articulating what it was that needed to change in order for them to, see a livable future. And so I think we can do that. We just need to get together and figure out how to be with each other and, create. I think that it was Thomas Friedman said, if we had 1 million Noahs and 1 million arks, we're not just trying to get one Noah's ark. We're trying to each one of us in our household or in our neighborhood, So I think that's a big part of it.
I also think something that's really helpful for people to get out of a crisis mode where they're freezing up and, don't know what to do is creating a plan. And so I like the idea that those folks you're talking about, that author created a plan of okay, we're going to bake pies. We're going to give them to people. We're going to influence them. We're going to tell them what we want. Taking action can feel very empowering, even if it seems small or is just pie,
Totally. Oh my God. And something else, right? People think that we have to convince the entire world, right? But actually, there's all this research on social movements that says you only have to influence 3.5% of the people in your community in order to have a massive sea change in legislation, right? So we only need, if you were to imagine your school, for example, if there was 1,000 people in it, can we get 35 of those people coming to regular weekly meetings? And then those 35 people each have, 30 people that are in their networks, and they're going to get those people out. And then once or twice a year, we're all going to come together at the state capitol and build the mass movement that we know is necessary.
That's great. Yeah, that makes it a lot more manageable when we can wrap our minds around it a little bit, which is hard to do for something that seems just so big. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, are there any, organizations that you want to shout out that you think are doing really good work, a place where our money, if we donate, is really getting used properly, any other resources, organizations, anything like that? You can also tell me, if you can't think of any, you can tell me and I can just put it in the show notes. But anything else that you want to share with people?
Totally. Well, I just want to say that one thing we haven't talked about is how this movement for climate justice intersects with other essential movements that are happening on this planet today. So, I've been on the front lines of resisting the Line 3 pipeline. Also, part of that movement is this movement, the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement has grown out of the same circles, right? So as we think about climate change and the what many of my Indigenous women friends have talked about, the literal rape of planet Earth, right? And we think about the way that we treat the Earth as the same as the way we treat humans, right? It is again, it's heart-wrenching. But I think that one of the things that we need to do, we need to do all those things that I just said, but we also need to remember that we can't allow people to divide our movements. So, I live in Minneapolis where, I'm a mile from the sort of epicenter of the uprising here around the murder of George Floyd. And, for us to say that police abolition or protecting women or, the movement for Black lives is different or the sort of understanding what's happened in terms of genocide in this country with I know I'm opening up this whole other can of worms, which I will stop. But I would say follow organizations that are not trying to make climate change like a single issue thing, but folks who are thinking about climate change as a integrated part of the movement to create a livable, equitable future for everybody. And so, there's this amazing network that's coming out of the Gulf South. It's called Taproot Earth. And they're sort of connecting the marginalization of Black and Brown people in Louisiana and around the world with the fight for climate justice. And so following groups like that, certainly the youth movements, Power Shift, Sunrise, the young people, there's no question about whether climate change exists. It's like, we're going to vote out all these folks who are making that even a question that we talk about.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, young people doing great work. I work a lot with Honor the Earth Native organization. And then, my organization does work with the faith community and trying to get them in right relationship with climate change as a moral issue has been a powerful lever, I think. So if people are interested in how their religious denominations are or groups are, engaging with this, Interfaith Power and Light, Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light are great places to go.
I have a lot of thoughts about that, where religion intersects with environmentalism that we do not have time for. Or
Yes.
maybe is not the nicest things to say. So I will keep my mouth shut for now. But that's good work. That's important work that you're doing.
The religions are at the base of both all of the biggest problems, and sometimes they sustain people through difficult times and help to provide a moral voice. So figuring out what that complicated relationship is kind of the same as figuring out the complicated relationship between people and each other.
Anything else before we say goodbye?
I don't think so. I got to just send out my love to folks at 350.org, Sierra Club. There's a lot of great environmental organizations that really get the climate justice story as well.
Where can people reach you, and what do you want to promote right now?
Yeah, you can find me it's Julia at mnipl.org. And I just want everybody to go and find their place in this movement. And don't feel like any action is too small. You got to start, and you got to talk about it, and then you got to wake up and do the next thing. And that's how we're going to make it happen together.
That's lovely. That's a lovely place to end. Thank you so much, Julia, for joining me today.
Oh, that was great.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Julia for that informative interview, and again to Rozzi for giving us a reason to talk about climate change. I guess that's my first small step, talking about this stuff. What's yours? I want to know. Keep listening to hear Rozzi's song, Orange Skies, and who knows, maybe some inspiration will strike. You can support this podcast by liking my YouTube channel and sharing, subscribing, and reviewing But Her Lyrics wherever you get your podcast. It's free and it helps. To find episode transcripts or to find out more about what I do, my book, my trainings, my Patreon, head to shawnapotter.com. To learn about all things War on Women, head to our link tree at linktree.ee/War on Women. All the links we mentioned in the interviews are in this episode's description, so check that out, see what you can do to help, and keep listening to hear Orange Skies by Rozzi.
Never felt the seasons that we didn't mind. Summer of gardenias, Laurel Canyon night, and every other moment too. Ocean drive, Water was too freezing, so we just got high, laughing in the backseat of our own damn lives. Whatever's coming won't be soon. Ooh, it's getting warmer. Ooh, it's getting warmer now, 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 now. Ooh, just like they told you. Ooh, it's getting warmer now, 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 now. Ooh, it's getting warmer. Ooh, it's getting warmer now, 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 now. Ooh, just like they told you. Ooh, it's getting warmer now, 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 now. Say goodbye, baby. Take one last good look at orange skies. Greatest love you had, you should have held on tight. Now there's nothing you can do. Orange skies that should be blue.